Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Great to be with you on another glorious week in the state of Texas. We're into the first week of October. It's getting a little cool out there. A lot of interesting things happen. We're not quite 30 days, a little bit more than 30 days before the main election day. That means we're probably right at or less than 30 days until early voting starts. Election day is November 5th. There's 2 weeks of early voting in the state of Texas leading up for that. I'll check the exact dates. It's usually Monday through Friday for 2 weeks, and then 2 or 3 days of quiet time, if you will, or no time at the polls until the main election day. Sometimes it includes a Saturday. Let me check that to make sure. But a lot going on about that at the national level, but certainly here at the state level. One of the most important elections in our state that we've seen in quite some time, and that is the U.S. Senate seat. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz running for re-election. We'll talk a little bit about that today. We may not talk a lot about football since my Longhorns are off this week, but that's kind of biased, right? I'm sure we can mention some other teams, the rest of the teams that are taking the field. Have a little bit of fun with that. I will be at a high school football game this Friday and reflecting on the continued and additional, if not restored, freedom that we have on Friday nights, thanks to Coach Joe Kennedy and our friends at First Liberty Institute for that U.S. Supreme Court victory a couple of years ago that restored that right to pray after football games and other things that employees have at public schools. And so, look, these type of issues are things you need to be thinking about when you go to the ballot box. As a reminder, the deadline to register to vote is coming up October 7th, so you don't have a lot of time left. I think that is next Monday. Let me check the calendar on that. But coming up pretty soon. So don't lose sight of that. Maybe you moved. Maybe you didn't move very far, like me. I moved like around the corner. But check into those things. Make sure you're okay because there is a deadline and you don't want to miss out on this presidential election, including a lot of different races up and down the ballot. Someone who knows about elections and a lot of these things happening in Texas and including Senator Cruz is our good friend Christian Collins, who's going to be our guest today on the Texas Values Report. He's been a guest quite a few times. He and I have had a lot of good opportunities to interact, spend time together, be friends, be at each other's event. He spoke at our event, our Texas Faith Fest, about 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, I was at his event that he was holding, Texas Youth Summit, and he recently received an award, the Future 40 Award. This is from Maverick PAC, joining a distinguished group of top young conservatives in the nation who exemplify the conservative movement with great diversity of thought, backgrounds, and experience as we celebrate their 20th anniversary. This was the Maverick PAC. That was a couple weeks ago. We'll let Christian talk about that. And plenty of other things to talk about if we want to chew on the vice presidential debate. Christian, welcome back to the Texas Values Report.
Well, Jonathan, thank you for having me on, and thank you for all that Texas Values does around the state.
Well, no, I appreciate that. Look, one of the things I didn't mention in your bio, former staff member for Senator Ted Cruz. That might have been the first time I met you, or at least sometime around that time. You also ran for Congress, right? And very involved in the local areas it relates to politics, but obviously getting youth out to different events. I know you speak at a lot of different youth events and colleges and universities around the campus. We're getting pretty close to the big election day, and obviously, as I mentioned, early voting. What are some things that you're seeing in sort of reflections? I know you get a lot of people there at your event. What's the mood out there amongst Texans, and particularly Christians as well? We'll talk a little bit about that, but going into this election coming up in 2 to 3 weeks.
Well, it's really interesting. Senator Cruz is polling just about 2% over his opponent, Colin Aldred, so it's a very tight race yet again. They're coming after Senator Cruz on the abortion issue, which is really an issue that is a wedge issue that drives out turnout on the Democrat side. So interesting because he's not in any way responsible for the bill that was passed in the state legislature, yet that's the TV ads that they're running to attack him on. And so it's an issue that they feel they can get a lot of people out to the polls and fight back. So all of us that are pro-life, we need to make sure that we defend Texas and defend Senator Cruz. Senator Cruz is the most conservative senator we've ever had. He's done a great job. He's incredible. He's the smartest guy in every room that he walks into. He does exceptional work on every issue, from the border to the economy to fighting for everyday Texans, just to make sure our gas prices, our food prices are reasonable. On every issue, from pro-life to being supportive of religious liberty, to defending our constitutional values. This guy would be a great Supreme Court justice. He would have made a great president, whatever he wanted to do, but he's our U.S. senator. We need to do everything that we can to defend him.
Well, he's got quite the distinguished history and record in a variety of ways. Even before he was our U.S. senator, he was the Solicitor General for the state of Texas under Greg Abbott. That means he was a part of the case at the U.S. Supreme Court defending the Texas Ten Commandments. If people remember that case from, I believe it was decided in 2005, maybe 2003 or 4. I was working on some legal briefs on that case, an amicus brief, when I was in law school. And so maybe it was '03. I'll check the date on that when that Supreme Court case came out. But Ted Cruz was there. Look, when I was a student at the University of Houston suing them to protect the free speech and religious rights of my pro-life group, Senator Ted Cruz was in the Solicitor General's office and had a role in making sure that the university didn't get away with those things. A lot of things even before he came into office. It's interesting when I think about MAVPAC and the Future 40-Year Award, I think about someone like Senator Cruz who, was that young leader a couple of decades ago and now has, established himself and has been someone that, next to Donald Trump, I hate to say under him, but, you've got Donald Trump probably has the most wide recognition as an elected official, particularly in Texas. And then there's Ted Cruz. I mean, he was almost the nominee or pretty close to the nominee for president for Republicans back in 2016, 2015. And so, that could have been real interesting. 2016. But that has continued. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people continue to still go after him, particularly on the left. Speaking of Trump, you had Donald Trump Jr. at your event, the Texas Youth Summit. And, I've got to work on my ability to be there for the entirety of the event at some point. Usually I'm a lot of times in a situation where I got to come in, speak, and then I got to scoot back to the house here in Austin. And that was the case this year. But you had some great people on that Friday night. I ended up speaking on Saturday, but you had Donald Trump Jr. I think there was like a coffee talk at some point between Senator Creighton and Donald Trump Jr. Is that right?
Yeah. So we had a great event. Excuse me. We had a great event, and we had this large turnout, almost 2,000 people there, most of them being youth. It's exciting to see all the support that we're getting around the state, and we really elevated the event this year with not only the number of speakers that we had, but also just the production and pyrotechnics and everything that went into making the event a really neat event.
The pyrotechnics. I wish we had a video of that. Maybe we'll dig one up. That wasn't a part of when I walked onto stage because it was a little early. But right before I left, I saw when you came on Saturday, and I saw some of those things, and it was like, kind of a little bit bigger version of like, a bunch of sparklers or whatever. And when I think of pyrotechnics, I think of sort of, the 80s and maybe early 90s of a lot of the rock bands that had all this, fire and different stuff. But it was fun, creates an exciting environment and, rounds it out and makes it interesting. And you had a pretty big room that you were in, tall ceiling. So plenty of safety.
It worked out. Yeah, I mean, obviously we want to not just have a pep rally, we want to have some policy-oriented conversation, but for young people, their attention span is probably 10, 15 minutes. I've taught college for the last decade at a local college in Houston. What I've seen with young people is that they can't pay attention very long. And so you need to integrate video, you need to integrate pyrotechnics and stimulate them in other ways where it's not just, someone goes up on stage, reads their bio, the speaker that's coming, and then the speaker comes out and speaks. And then, I mean, it's just, that's the most mundane, typical Republican event you've ever seen. And most people are fine with that. But young people, I mean, having the videography, having the pyrotechnics, having the lighting, it just makes it a little more interesting. And I grew up watching the WWE, so it kind of is reminiscent of that for me. So I joke, but it was a good event.
No, look, and I was at the RNC, I was, in my personal capacity, a delegate to the Republican National Convention, and I did also some work for Texas Values Action, our C4, while I was there. And there was a lot of production in Milwaukee, right? I mean, speaking of WWE, I think there was one of those, the UFC guy, I forget his last name, Dana, maybe you remember, was one of the speakers, and there was, and it's fun, right? And it keeps it exciting. It was probably a little bit older crowd on average there, but I think a lot of us, including people older than me, still enjoyed it. And, it keeps the energy up, keeps your attention, to your point. But let's talk about the youth a little bit, though. I'm curious. I mean, this is the name of your event, the Texas Youth Summit. You mentioned you speaking at colleges and universities and being a professor and so on. And look, I'm seeing, I was working with my daughter last night on some of her homework and just sort of providing her some moral and emotional support to keep her focus. And she was like, "Oh yeah." I said, "What are you watching? That doesn't sound like your schoolwork." "Oh, I was finishing up watching a video about Charlie Kirk. Do you know Charlie Kirk, Dad?" I'm like, I do. What is it about him, right? So we're seeing, I don't know if it's a rebirth. Maybe you could call it that, with his turning point, events across the country and different things that he's doing. I know he spoke at your event last year. But, there's something going on there where I think youth are a little bit more involved than maybe, the past 5-10 years. What I'm curious about is, are we going to see a noticeable impact, particularly, on the right, if you will, at the ballot box this election cycle?
Well, I sure hope so. I talked on this subject matter the other day on 740 KTRH, and I talked about how young men are trending more right and young women are trending more left. And I think that's in part because of the issues that are important to them on the right. I think they want to be entrepreneurs. I think they want to be independent. They don't want to be censored. They don't. All of these issues I think are important. On the left, I think for young women, the issue of reproductive rights, a lot of these issues that are appealing to them on the college campus or high school even, and so and also sorry, there's dogs in the background.
No problem.
Yeah, and also on the right, the heroes that we listen to. So for young boys, they like Joe Rogan. On the left, they like the women. They like Taylor Swift, and so. And Joe Rogan is not a perfect, conservative. He doesn't totally fit in that category. But he's obviously very masculine. He has that type of persona that is appealing to young men who want to be strong and they want to be fighters. They want to be entrepreneurial. They don't want to be censored, right? And on the left, just to reinforce those values, Taylor Swift is telling people to vote for Kamala Harris, and some of her music is good, but some of it isn't good. They have some lyrics that are not helpful to young women, and I think they're human flourishing. So some of the lyrics aren't good, but with Taylor Swift, she's leveraging her platform to sway young women to the left, and that's unfortunate, but it's just the culture that we're living in. And so what I am encouraged to do as a Christian is to be salt and light in the culture. And it's so easy for us to just sort of back away and just say, okay, I'm going to just, take, my Christian beliefs and keep them to myself. I'm going to go to church and I'm not going to do anything else. But he calls us to be salt and light into the culture. And we have to affect politics. We have to affect the entertainment industry. We have to affect every sphere of society, for the glory of God. And I think if we do that, if we make it about God, then I think we're doing the right thing. And so that's what I hope to do through these conferences. That's what I hope to do through my visits on the college campuses. I really want to help young people be plugged into the movement and help them find opportunities the way that there were people that helped me along my way and got me working for the right people, the right causes. And and with the summit, we have a lot of good sponsors who come and support our efforts, from Live Action to Texas Values to Students for Life and a lot of other groups. So they're able to get plugged into the movement and go and get involved. And maybe they go take a trip to Israel with Christians United for Israel, or they go work for Concerned Women for America and have an internship there, or maybe they go with Gun Owners of America or Texas Gun Rights. They go on a shooting trip, maybe go shoot guns and learn how to work, with rifles. And all of these opportunities are presented to them at the Texas Youth Summit. And we've had our students go work for good state reps like Steve Toth, or good members of Congress like Matt Gaetz. And and it's a great place for them to plug into the movement. And my hope, in through doing what I'm doing is to glorify God, but also give young people opportunities. And if they can go and do that, that's what it's all about. That's what makes me happy.
Well, look, there were a lot of young people at your event that's exactly what they're looking for. Those opportunities are looking for. They want to make a difference. They want their voice to matter, right? And they realize, hey, I can start doing something now, right? I mean,
Right.
Riley Gaines was one of your speakers on Saturday. She's spoken at numerous events that we've been involved in. What a blessing to get to know a young lady like that. We met her 2.5 years ago, and she's just skyrocketed in so many different ways, and she's not wasted any opportunity. I mean, she's done a
Right.
great job of realizing the importance of her presence, her voice, all of those things, and she's out there out front leading. And my daughter will talk about Charlie Kirk, and she's like, "Oh, Dad, you're having Riley Gaines at your event. I want to go see her." We have events, and young ladies and parents are bringing their little girls saying, "We came because my daughter heard Riley Gaines was going to be here." Right? That's so exciting. I don't, see that as often, and it's encouraging, right? So you're hoping that's going to turn into, okay, are you going to go do something? Are you going to show up at the ballot box? There's been concern that Christians over the years have been decreasing in their numbers of showing up at the ballot. We're talking with Christian Collins, who is the founder and leader of the Texas Youth Summit, an annual event that typically takes place just north of Houston in the Montgomery County or Conroe, Greater Conroe, Woodlands area. But he's run for Congress. He also worked for Senator Ted Cruz. He was recently given the award of the Future 40 Award by the Maverick PAC for his leadership. And I guess you have to be under 40 to get the award. Is that how it works? Right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the criteria. And so, but you mentioned the issue of life. I think we've got a clip from the vice presidential debate, which I think exceeded people's expectations in a variety of ways. Whether people liked, Waltz or they liked J.D. Vance, I think, there was some moments there that were pretty impactful that people were like, oh, this is pretty interesting, and I think some of it was the way that they handled themselves between each other, but some of the things that were said that were quite striking. And I think a lot of the things you see on the left, as much as they want to focus on the life issue, particularly Kamala Harris and now Waltz and maybe even Colin Allred, sort of running from the fact that their position on life is so extreme. It's not even about the so-called woman's right to choose. It's about whether or not they would protect a baby born alive as a result of a failed abortion. As a matter of fact, that is a real issue that's happened in Minnesota that Tim Waltz has been a part of, and he's not supported protecting a baby who's born alive as a result of a failed abortion. And he doesn't seem real comfortable talking about it. All right, we have a clip if you want to show that, Ashley.
And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
It's interesting. I mean, look, you and I know how important Texas is, so I'm not surprised when Texas comes up in a national debate like this. I'm reminded at least, and I'm like, yep, it's not an exaggeration. What happens in our state is very important. And what he said in that clip is absolutely not true, but that's where they want to convince people that because we protect life, that all of a sudden there are all these women that are going through these negative consequences. The only woman that I know that it's died as related to the abortion issue is a woman, Amber Thurman, who took abortion pills. The abortion industry was responsible for a woman's death. We haven't had any deaths in the state of Texas related to us protecting life. And so, but look, they get away with some of that, but it's in large part because they don't want to talk about the real issue of the value of human life. That is the human right. That's the real human right. As a matter of fact, that's what the U.S. Supreme Court has said. There is no constitutional right to an abortion, and now it's playing out in states. And look, I mean, that doesn't mean that our issues, so to speak, are always going to win. But that is our concept of federalism, right? I mean, that's, and so they're really struggling with that on the left. But I think the issue does matter a lot, but I do think it's allowed a lot of our folks to be able to show how extreme the other side is. And I think it's an issue that, young people still care a lot about. What do you think?
Well, I think the way J.D. Vance handled every single one of those questions was done with excellence. I mean, he's not against women. He's pro-family, and there's a difference. And he talked about how Republicans need to be able to communicate their ideals better in such a way where it's acceptable and understood more easily by the greater population. And he recognizes this, knowing that there's been a referendum on abortion in Ohio, and it was overturned. And so that's a Republican state, but it happened. And he recognizes that it is a wedge issue. It angers a lot of people on the left who don't understand. Maybe there's a lot of good people actually that maybe in a situation where they've had an abortion or they are interested in having an abortion if they ever get in that situation. And they're not necessarily the bad people, but they just misunderstand the values of the Republican Party. They misunderstand that it's about preserving family. It's about promoting family. It's about making it easier in the United States to have a family. And in doing all these things, there would be fewer abortions, and people would be less likely to even want to have one. Their life is not over because they've been in a vulnerable situation where they need to have an abortion, or they're having a baby out of wedlock. Their life is not over, but a lot of young women maybe think that would be the case. And so he really communicated his ideals, I think, very effectively throughout this process. And I commend him. I think he gave an A+ debate, and I think Waltz looked very nervous and anxious, and like he hadn't been doing any debating or any talking for a long time. And so, excuse me, I think we definitely won that debate, and I think on the issue of abortion, we need to continue to move the needle with the population, winning the culture war, move it to the right so that young people understand why it's important to be pro-life.
Well, and look, I mean, there's other issues, too, the left doesn't want to talk about that I think they've had some struggles with. The Save Women's Sports issue is one of them, right? Where you see Democrats like Sean Theory and others switching parties. Here in our state, Democrat, now she says she's a Republican, and others because they feel like the Democratic Party has left them or whatever and is being unreasonable. People like Martina Navratilova, who's probably one of the most famous lesbian sport athletes, sort of a pioneer in that category, if you will. And she's like, what are y'all doing? What's my side doing, sort of from her perspective? And she's been frustrated with it because she thinks, taking away opportunities for young ladies is wrong. It's not about an issue of LGBT. It's about fairness. We see ads that Senator Cruz has been running on that as well in his race. Riley Gaines talking about a lot about this issue, and that issue, being very talked about in social media. Numerous universities now, particularly in the northwest part of the United States, I think Utah State, Wyoming, and others have said, we're not letting our girls participate against schools anymore that have a boy participating as a woman or a man participating as a woman in sports. And so that's an issue that I think young people are starting to tune into more, and is going to, we're going to see some of that evidence of that at the ballot box. Real quick, too, about Texas, and look, I agree, J.D. Vance did a great job. I mean, I met him in person. Well, we didn't shake hands. I was in the audience for an event a week and a half ago here in Austin when he was here, and saw him about, 20, 30 feet away when he was on the stage at the RNC. And the guy's just polished, right? He's smart. And I think he had a real thoughtful, considerate delivery. The guy looked presidential. He looked like this is going to be the vice president of the United States. He took some tough questions, right? And he also fact-checked the fact-checkers with the moderators who, again, tried to influence, the outcome and the perception and just the way that the debate was going. But he did it in a very respectful way. So he really showed some confidence and really responded to a lot of tough questions, or at least questions that were designed to be tough towards him, and gave some thoughtful answers that I think people are like, okay, that makes sense, right? Very smooth delivery. And so I think that was his best opportunity that might be the only time the majority of people in America, or the highest percentage, saw him and hear him. And, I think he passed that test with flying colors as far as taking advantage of that opportunity. But Texas isn't we just got a couple of minutes left, but I'm curious, speaking of Steve Toth, the Texas House is positioned to possibly have a different Speaker of the House. David Cook is sort of the alternative or the reform candidate, whatever he's being called, against Dade Phelan now going into the legislative session. And I know you care a lot about those issues at the state level. That's not done. That vote doesn't come until January. But I do think that's something that's important for voters to have on their minds when they go to the ballot box. Who is my representative supporting for Speaker of the House, or, what have they indicated their positions are on these issues?
Yeah, well, in the general election, we definitely need to make sure that we vote Republican across the board. In the primary, which will come in, June of 2025, we need to look at, who these candidates supported and, take a good hard look at that, because we need to have a speaker that does not want Democratic committee chairs, because that's just not acceptable. They don't do that in Congress, so why are we doing that out here on the state legislature? But look, with the speaker race, all Dave Phelan needs is 13 Republicans, and he can get the rest of the Democrats, and he can win. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, they can do everything that they can on the Republican side to try and usher in as much support for this new reformed candidate. But the reality is, he just needs 13 Republicans. And so,
well, look, and a lot of this comes down to who's going to show up at the ballot box. That's a big thing for us, getting people to the polls, reminding pastors, churches, you have a incredibly important role to play. Turnout is going to be key for all these different issues. All right, we're just about out of time, Christian. Sorry to cut you off there. Listen, appreciate all the work that you do. Thank you for your friendship and your value to the state of Texas. And thanks for being our guest today on the Texas Values Report.
Thanks for having me on, Jonathan. Take care.
Okay, I got 20 seconds left. I cut it kind of close there. That's my fault on Christian. I apologize on that. But a lot of good stuff to talk about. And look, he knows the issues, so I just kind of let the meter run there. We have an event coming up on Tuesday, October 15th, Collin and Denton County. That is a candidate event. It's a C3 event. We're not going to be endorsing people, telling you to vote for. You just get a chance to meet the candidates. Our gala is in the Dallas area on November 2nd. The keynote speaker is David A.R. White. He is the lead actor and star of the God's Not Dead movie series. The most recent one came out a couple of weeks ago, In God We Trust. It has an election theme. It has a Christians going to vote theme. Timely message. You don't want to miss it. Go to our website, txvalues.org. Hey, listen, if you see value in our work, please consider a tax-deductible donation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and that's how together we can protect faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.